I just want to make sure. It's not- And I will try and keep this like to an hour, but I mean, sometimes we get super chatty too, so. Okay, sounds good.
Should we lower the TV considering that we are blocked?
It should rotate, I think,
Does it?
right? Like from the people, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no, so it's on us.
Okay.
Okay, so I will call, it is 6:07, the Village of Cottage Grove Library Board meeting on Wednesday, July 17th at 6 PM, 6:07, to order. There is a quorum and the agenda was properly posted. There is, I think, nobody on the Zoom or in person to speak. So we can move on to the fourth agenda item, which is discuss and consider the minutes from the May 15th Library Board meeting. And those are always linked in the agenda. Any discussion?
I move we approve the minutes from the May 2024 Library Board meeting.
There's a motion, is there a second?
I'll second.
There's a motion by Megan, a second by Eric. Any other discussion? All right, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstain?
Abstain.
One abstain. Motion carries. All right, we're gonna move to old business, which is discuss strategic planning. So if, for our new member, we in January decided to, actually, it's probably been a year now. So we have kind of refocused much of what we, what our goals are as a library board and what library means in Cottage Grove. And so we kind of embarked on this like basically formal strategic planning minus hiring a consulting company to run us through it, but still kind of the same steps. So linked in the agenda is the draft of the strategic plan. And just to kind of run you through it, so there is a very draft executive summary, which will likely change based on tonight's discussion. I think this was in January, kind of went through kind of our approach to how we were going to strategic plan, kind of the steps we were going to take. We revised our mission, vision, and core value statements earlier this year. In December of last year, we also approved a DEIA BC statement. And then we spent a couple of months going through formal SWOT analyses, both as a library facilities subgroup and then also as the library board. And so those SWOT results are in the strategic plan, as well as kind of a theme, an analysis theme of what kind of popped out in terms of strengths, risks, and then opportunities that we kind of have identified. And then the pages that I wanted to concentrate on today were 12 through 14. So really looking at the kind of 5 SMART goals, which are on page 12, and wanted to get your thoughts on kind of what came out of our SWOT analysis and putting them into kind of 5 buckets, and then kind of identifying how we would measure those, achieve those, when we would want to achieve them. So I thought we could start by kind of going through these 5 kind of main takeaways. And then it would be really helpful out of these 5 main takeaways to talk about the next 3 years and what we would want, how we would want to accomplish it. What specifically, which is going to be really helpful for me writing a budget for next year and in the coming years. What do we think we need to budget for? What are our big asks? And I think that really it's a little bit more, provides more transparency. Especially going back to the village board and also to village staff, but like really providing like us guidelines, and then there's no surprises for why we're asking for certain things and that kind of stuff. So on page 12, investigate and acquire physical space was one of the probably the biggest takeaway, I think, out of all of our discussions over the last 6 months. The facility subcommittee did not meet. We were hoping to kind of accomplish that specific bucket last month, but we didn't have a quorum, so we didn't meet. So we can talk about it a little bit, and hopefully then the facilities, when we meet next month, can finalize it or change it, however. So identifying a physical location in Cottage Grove, specifically, I think with the intent to kind of anchor programming, a place to store all of the things, give Tracy space to do stuff, but also a free community meeting space with internet were also kind of things that we identified. I think I have in here that we probably need to do maybe a short feasibility study, which we've done bits and pieces of. We've identified like what would need to go in the space. Carl went through our other master plan from last year and picked out spaces and square footage that would maybe meet these kind of requirements. And so they've kind of come up with a ballpark of, I think, like 2,300 feet or something, 26. 2,600 square feet, I think, for like a space. And then, I guess, working with like a realtor, I've talked a little bit with South Central and Dane County, and I think Dane County's been encouraging, like, okay, if this is your next step, like, how can we help move these goals along, knowing that we're still gonna pay Dane County library tax. I think like finding an available space that's big enough, and then we'd have to do a lot more research on like what a lease looks like for a village. I think it's really complicated. It would all be operational. And so I think if you turn the page, I have referendum in red, because I don't know if this puts us over the levy. Like, there's just a lot of unknowns in this category. So.
Cindy, for our 3 new library board members, can you please explain the Dane County library tax?
Sure, and I'll have an update on that actually, like in my report.
Okay.
So the village without its own physical library pays Dane County library tax. So we pay the county, every time you go to a library and you check something out, basically there's a cost associated with that. So it's on your tax bill, it's part of the Dane County taxes, so you're not gonna ever see like library tax on the tax bill. But it is a portion of what you pay in your property tax goes to the county, that goes to Dane County Library Services, which then ends up redistributing those funds to other libraries. So instead of the tax dollar staying in the village, it goes to the libraries where Cottage Grove card users are using. So if your address is in Cottage Grove, you go to Monona Library, every time you check things out, that's part of the village's tax bill is going to Monona Library. So that ends up typically going back to offset operational costs for that library. I think I had put down a goal for at least acquiring physical space as kind of being ready to look towards that goal January 1st of 2026. But I would be interested in hearing people's thoughts about that.
Question, sorry. So you mean like, not necessarily do you mean opening doors on January 1st? Do you mean like we've identified a space that we could acquire and this is a thing we're gonna move forward on?
Yes.
Okay.
Is that not turning on?
No,
Do you want?
just give me a second.
I can't drink out of this. Like, it looked like it was gonna explode, and now I can't. Yeah, I think, so this year, I thought we would the facilities committee next meeting, we'll define specifically how that space is gonna be used. We've got a list of like expenses that we think would go into the space in terms of like things that we need. They put together a really nice spreadsheet, but I think we probably need to come up with, maybe this is something we do next year, a better idea of how much it costs to rent, how much internet costs, insurance, maintenance, cleaning. Like, I don't know what that whole list looks like, and I think that that's something that is needed.
There you go. Got a
Okay.
working mic now. So yes, sorry if I missed this when I was trying to figure out the mic, but the space will be for programming, a little bit of storage for supplies, and then what else would be used or be part of that space?
I think we've talked a little bit about meeting space, so like, not only for like the formal programming that Tracy puts on, but like if you wanted to hold a meeting there, if you needed a workspace during the day, maybe smaller spaces, where like little study rooms, if you can, because study rooms were something that we had identified in the master plan as being important, just because that those spaces don't exist here, especially for people working from home. A place for internet, a place to, and I had a meeting this morning with McFarland's library director too, and she's like, you know, there could be book sales that occur there. You know, there is a homebound book delivery service that services other like demographics in the area, but maybe like this is all something similar to that, where you have holds you can pick up. It could be a giant little free library, like a whole wall of it, that kind of stuff.
So as I'm listening to this and thinking about this, there seems to be kind of a step up from, if we're looking at this space as just a programming space that ostensibly a library program would happen in, and then the library programming and outreach specialist, AKA Tracy, would be there while that's happening, and or she would be, you know, loading and unloading supplies there that you're storing. Like, that to me is one level. But if we're talking about having it with us, having it be a space then that other outside people could have a meeting in or could work in during the day, then are we talking about we need to have a staff member there during that time?
Mm-hmm.
And now we have a different, kind of a different level of interim space library. Like, am I,
So I think that goes into
and I don't know
like-
where we,
And maybe 2 and 1 need to be switched around in terms of goals. I think maybe the first goal, I think originally we were like, short-term space is like the main goal. Well, we probably need to formalize our staffing and get a staff member up to full-time and a department level status first, and then have the physical space where it opens up, like this is her workspace, this is Anchor's library, this is all the things that like we think can happen in this space is now like feasible.
especially, yeah, the more you talk about this, number 2 seems like it might have to happen first. Because you think about the number of things just that you were listing off about, you know, who's gonna clean the bathrooms? The internet goes down. There's all these things that go along with maintaining a space that now, if we don't have an actual library department, do they call you on Saturday night when there's a flood?
Probably.
And that probably, you know,
And
like, again, like without that kind of infrastructure in place, then that's putting, again, more on library board, more on Tracy's plate
Right.
that we don't have the hours for,
Right.
the budget for. So I just, or again, like being more clear about what we want to use this very starting interim physical space for.
Okay. If you
'Cause again,
could
I
give me a
think-
definition of short-term space,
Sure.
what do you think?
Oh, me?
Anyone?
Well, I think that's the wrong question. Well, I think we'll get there in a second. I think the better way to go about this is almost a mix of 1 and 2. Because before we can even get to what does this space look like, we have to think about what's the limitations.
Mm-hmm.
What are we bound by? So Megan brought up quite a few of them right then and there. So staff is one element in there. But then from there, it's like, okay, space, what are we looking to do? Does it need to be big enough? What is the setup? Can it be modular, in essence, is one of the things I heard in the conversation, the ability to
Yeah.
ping back and forth. Thinking through all those things of like, what are the critical needs? What are like the wants? And the, oh my God, it would be great to have, type things. And then using that to kind of inform what's the ask, because at the end of the day, it's gonna come down to money and budget. And then I feel like we can take that next step of, all right, now we got all that in place, we can think through the staffing, the program, et cetera. Then it tells us what we can do within the limits that we have.
So we can definitely bring that back to facility committee and they make them kind of go through this exercise. Since that's what we've done bits and pieces of, I think, but putting it all together would be helpful next month. In terms of like timeline for, does it make sense to go staffing and the library, like getting Tracy up to full-time by the end of 2025, which is next year, and then acquiring a space 2026?
That makes sense to me.
Quick definition check. 2025, is that fiscal year or is that budget year? And is the budget and
So,
fiscal year the same?
It is the same. So village is January 1st.
Okay.
I know, it's very wild. Like, I'm used to a July 1st start. But yeah, so when I say 2025, I mean like January 1st. Is budget, starts your budget. I'm talking about the calendar year, which is the budget year, which is, yes.
So you're saying in 5 months, the goal, or are you saying at the end of 2025 by December 31st, we'll,
Like she would have rolled in, so I think, I don't know if I put this down here, I put increased staff to full-time, I think with the idea of being full-time by Q4. So with this is a budget ask, so I think it'll probably be maybe one of our only budget asks for next year is to increase the position to a full-time staff position by Q4.
okay.
And the village has done that with other departments, so that's not really a foreign concept.
It's not, but it's also needs to take into consideration what the next fiscal year looks like, because if you can only hire someone for a quarter and then you can't sustain that, then it's not good.
Cindy, could you maybe explain the benefits of being a formal department as opposed to kind of what we are now?
Yeah, so we're not considered a formal department. I think that it provides maybe a little bit more structure moving forward in terms of having somebody at staff meetings to kind of increase efficiencies and communication there. It gives, I think the requirement would be as a full-time department head, you would be at appropriate village board meetings, you would sit and present budgets. I think as a full-time employee, that opens up the amount of, increases the amount of programming time we can do, but also and we had talked a little bit too about providing more consistent weekly programs become more obtainable with a full-time person. What else have we talked about?
I think you're understating the amount of work you do as a volunteer. So perhaps as a full-time staff person,
Right.
I have more opportunity to apply for grants and to actually take the information that's happening at this meeting and plug it into the strategic plan, make
Right.
memos. So hopefully
Right,
that will
policy,
reduce dependency
yeah.
on volunteers as
Yes.
well.
Yeah. I think it would increase, doing all the things that a paid person should do in this position.
Do we know what the procedure is for creating a department? Is there a specific
So it's my understanding that, I think we would, if we increase Tracy to full, or whoever, so we have a closed session tonight too, to full-time, we could retitle the position, and make that a department level, department head position, Department of One, which exists. It's not uncommon. And that would, I think that's it.
So it doesn't have to go to the village board? Or it does go to the village board once you,
I
like
mean,
if we
ultimately, I think
transition
like this is
that
gonna be the
position?
budgets, yeah,
Okay.
and we'll have the.
But there
justice-
isn't like a set of municipality rules about like you have to do these things to create a new
I
department
don't
within
think
a,
so.
okay.
Good question. Does it make sense? So I guess, do we feel like investigating the choir space, we'll put that back on the facilities committee, but we think that that timeline seems appropriate. So then in terms of formalized staffing, by Q4 of 2025, I think does that make sense to be the budget ask? And then, we have talked too about, so I think, right now, I think the biggest limitation is that there's a ceiling effect with the amount of programming that can happen, and obviously there's a bigger burden on volunteers. And that transition would alleviate some of that volunteer burden, but also provide more opportunity to service the community. With that, I think operational funding is going to have to also increase, like, and then when I say operational, I mean like supplies, would have to increase too. I said 25% in year one.
So.
Which right now, just to like update, we have like about a $10,000 supply and programming budget, which is for 100 programs throughout the year right now. And then increasing that by 25% would get us the same consistent amount of programming up until Q4, when maybe as that increases time and efforts on the employee side, we can also increase the amount of services.
I think we had also talked about working into some professional development to get me to the level of a bona fide librarian, so that we don't have to pay McFarland librarians to come in, which would in turn save us money because we aren't paying those
Right.
fees.
And there are like memberships that we forego as well, so we can offer more programs versus like being members to get more resources to come up with new ideas, so.
And then remind me, the budget, that includes the allocation from the village, but then also, does that include the grants that we've received?
No, so there is a memo under new business about kind of like distributing how we're funding the library fund. So the allocation that is given to the library general fund comes from the village. Once it's allocated during budget season and approved, it goes to our fund, and then the library board has discretion over those funds. That's also state statute. And then we, for transparency's sake, publish obviously all of our budget stuff in all of our agendas, and then we're gonna do some other kind of like infographic informational things to kind of show where the less than 1% of this budget of the village goes to.
Okay, 2 questions. Remind me what the budget is this year for the library board? What did we request and what did we get?
35-ish.
Okay.
And I think to your point about grants, it's really hard to get grants. I know there's a lot of effort that goes into it, and that's not money that can be counted on every year, I don't think. And it really supplements programming versus like, relying on that.
And they're pretty programs specific. If you
Mhm.
think, for example, we got the grant from the International Brain Foundation to purchase books for Brain Week. So we can't take that money and use it for story time, for example.
So like if we didn't get that grant again, that program just wouldn't be offered.
Okay, my other question then
Mhm.
in number 3, you talk about increasing the library's budget by 25% within the
Mhm.
next fiscal year. Is that 25% meant to include the increased cost of a full-time employee
No,
versus
I think
part-time?
that-
Okay, that was just
That
for
was
like,
I guess we're referring to that as budget, as like
Like
the
programming
programming
budget.
budget.
Okay.
So I mean,
okay.
clarify that. So yeah, in terms of budget and funding, I think continuing to apply for grants as we can, knowing that like it's until there's a full-time staff person that becomes like not probably a regular occurrence. But we could create a better database, I guess, too, to pull from grant opportunities.
And also, I think a small amount of my time as a full-time staff person could also be soliciting individual and business donors as well, including strengthening the relationship with the Friends to provide regular support.
Do you think that that should occur in next year or year 2? 26?
I think 26. I think 3 months at the end of next year will kind of helping me just kind of ramp up to be a full-time employee. Or whoever you hire.
Because, I mean, Tracy's old position was to fundraise for libraries. She's pretty well-rounded then. I guess budget requests for space would go into like bucket 1, but are there other capital projects over the next 3 years that should be considered in space? Short-term space isn't going to be a capital, I don't believe.
Sorry, I have a question, and I know it's going back a little bit, but also is relevant here,
Yeah.
is the Dane County Textwood Library.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure there's a threshold in terms of X meets the definition of a library.
Yes.
What is that threshold?
Sure. So there is, I can give you all the documentation you would ever want. So there are there's 2 levels. So state statute chapter 43 outlines libraries at the state level in all things library. Dane County has its own set of requirements. And so these requirements aren't necessarily a square footage requirement for a library, but they are more like, and it's all population based. And there's different tiers that you can fall into. And it has to do with, so we're jumping up probably into the next category of 10,000 to 24,999 population. And so we need to meet collection requirements. There is a technology component. They're kind of revising some of those standards, but they used to be like computers per 10,000 people or whatever. What were some of the, there's,
Open hours,
a number of hours
staffing.
open, number of staff. So for our municipality, we would have to have 7 FTEs as a requirement. We would need X many periodicals, X many books, like that kind of stuff. And then we've done a bunch of like space management or space identification. Every book is considered to be X big, X flat, like, and like, if you have this many, this is how big your collection space has to be. The live load of the building is important because you have all these book stacks, so it has to meet all these other kind of requirements. So it's very complicated. They are kind of redoing some of those requirements for 2025, I think is when they plan on launching that. But you have to meet all of those requirements. You can call yourself a library at any time, but in order to get reimbursed the Dane County Library tax, you have to meet those requirements. And from open, I think they give you a grace period of like 3 to 5 years, and that can be negotiable sometimes.
And it is a significant tax, and to share that number.
Yeah, so I mean, that's like, I think in part of my report, but, and every year it's gonna go up. And it's, again, based on usage, so the more people we have here and the more people that are using other libraries, the more that tax is going to go up. I'll save the number for later.
So needless to say, like, big picture, we're quite far away from meeting that threshold.
You need a
we don't-
library building.
We don't have anything near that, and even an
Yes.
interim space
Well,
without having a
But
collection.
we are allowed to call it a library.
We can call it a library, but we're
Yep.
not even close to like running up against that
No.
problem of now we don't apply for, what's the word I want?
Reimburse.
Reimburse, yeah, that we don't fit their criteria
No.
for getting reimbursed.
Yes, I think that this space, there is no option for a collection. Especially because if you do purchase a collection, we would own it. We would not be part of the library system, to we couldn't get loans from other places. There would be no switching of books or materials. You would have to invest in the technology infrastructure to like scan items and track items, and like that's not that's expensive and requires more than one full-time person.
Our collection would essentially be the bookmobile.
Yes.
And working with them to come at more convenient times for residents using the interim space.
Is that maybe part 4 of programming, strengthen partnerships and community collaboration? Is my words not even making sense here? Maybe increasing bookmobile access, become, like, after you get the space established, like getting that collection, so that's like maybe year 3 of that.
Devil's advocate, is that too limiting? Or do we want to open it up and give us a possibility, if need be, or want to, connect with other local libraries as well?
I don't like in terms of being like part of the system, or
Like whether it's programming, agreements, something along those lines. I'm just saying if we go broader and say library services, again, you can wordsmith it a little bit more in there. But that gives us a little bit of flexibility based off of our plan to pivot if need be, if an opportunity so does present itself.
sure. Yeah, because right now we bring in like McFarland's comes to Cottage Grove once a week. Monona too. We flip flop stuff. So really, like, I'm hearing for budget, going back to number 3, probably no capital requests for the next 3 years. Increasing to staffing full-time is like our priority, and increasing programming operations would be on an annual basis. And then this interim space would include those financial asks separately, and we'd have to figure out probably a lot more in terms of like what goes in for that kind of budget. It would be much more complicated for 2026.
So that is, interim space is not a capital request?
No.
Because we're borrowing.
We're renting it or leasing it.
Yeah, so
Like
it would
not
go on
owning?
the levy. My understanding is that it would be on the levy, and then I don't know if that's even possible. And so that's where, like, is there a potential where we'd have to ask for a referendum? If you put that in there, would that be in 2025?
I don't know.
You're out before April 2025
Yeah.
from the facilities committee's capacity. In
Well-
order to communicate a clear message to the voter.
To the voter and the village board.
So you
And as,
think it's going to be next year, a whole another year of researching and getting that budget figured out while staff transitions, and then in 2026, referendum, approved budget, and open doors in 27. Open doors.
For me, I think the biggest question that needs to be addressed before we can even make a determination is what is allowable for us in terms of a space. what is that process like? Does it have to go through referendum, or is there another procedural avenue? And once we know that answer, I think that can determine what our plan is in regards to the space and
Okay.
process there and timeline.
Okay. Jumping back down to 4, other ideas for the next 3 years for partnerships, community collaborations. We had talked at the last meeting about coming up with a formal scale or a rubric for programs to decide whether they are, if something we should repeat, or, I don't think that necessarily needs to be done, not even like this year, because we're still gathering data on numbers and but maybe that's a 25 goal. Actually, I think I put it in 25. Like establishing that rubric, and then it gives us an idea of what, if we should not put effort into events. One thing, I think we'll talk about this later maybe too, is that we will likely take over the Friends programming in its entirety, but they'd still be like our collaborative partners on it, but we would do all of the Tracy would do all of the marketing, organizing, execution of it. And then improve marketing and communications is the last kind of identifiable goal. And I don't know if we want to like come up with, like I think I have like increased program attendance by 30%, and I have like or do we not want to be that specific? I think we're always looking for new ideas to like get information out, because we're only hitting a small number of people who live here. Possibly the creation of like an annual report. I think we talked a lot about like more infographics about like where the money goes, what programs are offered, like with dividing it up. And I think we've redone the data tracker spreadsheets, which I think is very helpful because it breaks things down to where we can pull data really easily.
I don't know if we should have an attendance-based goal. JP would probably say, you know, if some of especially our programs for toddlers and early preschool kids, if we increase those by 25%, it's gonna just be chaos, and the kids that are there won't get as much out of that experience. So maybe it's, you know, variety of programming for different age groups, or reaching new audiences in Cottage Grove that we aren't currently speaking to. You know, we only have 600 people that follow us on Facebook for a community of almost 10,000 people. Who are those other people that aren't hearing from us? How do we find them?
That was my question as well, like the 30% increase, because you're right, there's some programs that could not sustain that kind of increase at this point. And maybe we need to look more at if we need to have a measurable goal.
Just
increasing the
number, like the number over the year.
Over the year, increasing the number of Facebook followers, increasing the number of, you know, I mean, I think what we as a library board would find the most telling of success would be to have a larger variety of like, instead of having just more numbers, but it's a lot of the same people coming to this programs over and over again, but to be hitting a wider percentage of the community, which is not something that you can easily track necessarily, but just if we could, I think we can list a measurable goal, but have it be more generic.
Okay.
I would say
Sorry, go ahead, JP.
if we do anything attendance-based, I think it would be better to go increase the number of people we've interacted with. get that wider breadth than that core group that's always going to an event in there. I think that would be a worthwhile goal to try and that would actually also help us understand, actually, as I didn't think about this, yeah, well, even allow us an opportunity to do the deeper dive into the data and see who are the new individuals that attended an event, what was the event like, what was the draw, and give us a better idea of, all right, does that help inform our next set of programming moving forward?
Do you think it would be worthwhile to track bookmobile data? For example, at the bookmobile celebration, John said that they had 5 new people sign up for library cards, and to him, that was monumental leap. Tracking the growth of the people that visit the bookmobile, or
So that data is
Is it the
available,
story
because you can
walk?
get that out of the Dane County and like the library reports, I think.
since the bookmobile is our collection, and
Mm-hmm.
part of my job is to work on services in addition to programs.
And then
wonder
I
if we
do
think
ask
about
Tracy Harold with Dane County to pull all the Cottage Grove data every year to see how many card holders are there, where are we going, which is mostly, and then obviously we talked to McFarland too, and she's like, well, you know, Cottage Grove comes to all of our story times, but most of the checkouts for like are coming out of Sun Prairie and Penny. So. Okay, and then anyone else have any ideas for actions or timeline or?
Excuse me, I spy school communication on there.
Yeah.
And I know I brought this up at the last meeting, and there was talk about reaching out to the new superintendent. And that's a big part of her 100-day plan, is communication with all stakeholders. And has anyone, is that my job as the school
It's
rep?
it's on my list to talk with her, but Tracy's
Okay.
already been in communication a bit.
Yeah, so we are working with school admin to do a story time with the superintendent on August 1st at CGS in the lower playground. Jessie Starr has been really helpful in securing that venue. So she'll be reading 3 to 5 books, depending on the energy level, about going back to school, and then the school will be purchasing popsicles to give out to the kids. So pretty low-key, but it's definitely meant for her to meet stakeholders in the community. That's only 2 weeks away, and August is crazy busy, so if you have any ideas, Lisa, on how to get that to the school community in the summer, I could execute that.
Well, I'm also just wondering, how do we get the schools to communicate with all students what library programming looks like? Because that would hit a,
We've had some roadblocks, I think, with that, and so hopefully maybe like establishing, like talking to Katie or at the school district. I don't know if we've ever had an actual sit down, or if it's just mostly been over emails.
We had the PTO had a very productive meeting with her, Katie, in the admin office or in the district office, and clarified exactly what needs to happen in order to get something in the newsletter. So the library board or you might want to reach out and just say like, hey,
Sit down.
like have a sit down or just clarify things, because there were some pieces that we didn't know about. There's been some changes as to who's supposed to get which emails and all that kind of thing. So I know that was a big roadblock last year, or just something that was inconsistent and didn't seem to be would seem to be a really good avenue to get information out to all the families in the district.
Yeah, and then maybe in terms of superintendent, and there's also an assistant superintendent now too. So maybe requesting, and that, because I'd like to meet them personally too and just have a conversation, but maybe like the 2 of us could like all do that, the 3 of us. Can't have quorum. Okay, the last page then is our evaluation communication plan for this. It's just like kind of my rambling. Actually, the whole document is my rambling. So if you do have suggestions or typos or whatever, like, you feel free to send them to me. I think that this plan, like, we should probably revise it. Like, I'm hoping to bring a finalized plan into our September meeting and we can approve it. And then we should incorporate this somehow into our annual meetings, where we take a look again, like, and this will give us, you know, mission, vision, core values. We revisit those. We revisit the annual goals. Maybe every January we do this, because we have programming meeting in December. So I just thought of one thing. Do you think that we'd ever want to go back to monthly meetings? Once, is there like a year where we'd want to like increase our meetings? If we do have a full-time staff, would we want, and we get an interim space, do we want to go back to library board meetings every month?
I think that's a great idea. Especially the ideas we have moving forward. I don't want to speak for everybody.
I'd love coming here. I would love to see you all every single month, so. As long as it's not a staffing issue, you know, or like a cost issue. I know staffing hours was an issue at some point, so.
I think the facilities subcommittee might need to ramp up a little bit too.
We can talk about that at our next meeting too. We can bring that if there is a lot of research we want to do and we want to talk a little bit more often, maybe holding some special meetings or changing the frequency of that could happen. We kind of backed off on meetings because of staff recommendations and then like reorganizing, but if we are like working towards goals, we can definitely change that.
Is there a certain year or quarter we'd want to grow the facilities subcommittee so it has more members? Because right now you're relying pretty heavily on Lucas and Carl.
And then JP and
I'm all
actually
for
Megan
And Eric.
and Eric, yeah. But yeah,
The two of them
in
have been
term
doing a lot
like-
of research.
Yeah,
Yeah, it seems.
we could, would that be like a next year goal to, if we're going to start looking and like identifying, you can add that to the list. Okay. And then in terms of, I mean, the village does an annual library annual community survey, and they just added library on there. So that gives us some, and I sent you guys that email, gives us some more data to collect. We could, I think Tracy and I have talked too about, are there other ways to get feedback? Do we want to have a suggestion box at programs? Do we want to have, we've put some surveys on our Facebook page, more specific. And then, I mean, obviously we do progress reports. And we can consider like an annual progress report too. That includes also like updates on how the progress we're making in terms of this. I mean, granted, we have like our agendas that are covering all of this, but if we put together a report and then like actually report back to the village board or staff meetings or whatever that means. Thoughts?
You threw a whole lot at us at once there.
Sorry.
I guess my overall thought on this last page is, I think there's some great points in there, but in many ways it should mirror our SMART goals, and the sub-elements we stated to meet those goals should be the KPIs for this. Because then that gives us the measurable elements to move forward there. So the work we just did with those 4 or 5 goals, we can just copy it down, maybe add some of the things, because there's some things in here that we didn't quite go into depth or had the conversation about that are still absolutely valid. We can put in there, but I think they need to be more in alignment with one another.
Maybe take like these reviews and stuff and actually put them in the timeline, like annual reviews and progress reports and even some of this stuff.
I also think the suggestion box is a great idea, and I'm wondering if that's something we could even implement now, you know, just for future programming and.
So like move all of this stuff into like the timeline.
So
And then
again,
like just use this.
Because we have open meeting and it's being recorded, you have to state what?
Record the progress report, survey mechanisms, annual report, strategies, and actually put that into the timeline.
There you go.
Is that what you mean?
I think that, but I was more looking at the the first element, development key performance indicators.
Yeah.
So notice that, again, those are the same, but those sub-elements we talked about, those can go in here.
Okay.
From the SMART goals, that's more what I was referencing. But I see your point in terms of, in many ways, the progress reports, surveys, feedback, surveys, feedback is part of a communication goal in there, so I feel like we can consolidate that all down
Okay.
a little bit.
Do that. Other ideas?
Sorry, I just thought of it. Can I clarify? So on these SMART goals, are these in no particular order, or are these our order of priority? And if so, it kind of sounds like from our discussion, we think formalizing staffing and establishing the library department would be the one to tackle first.
Right, I don't think they were necessarily
They're-
in any order, but
Okay,
I'll
just
I'll
checking.
flip them around.
I don't think, and there's gonna be some obviously that
Well, it
kind
makes sense
of
because
happen.
25 before 26.
Right, and like improving marketing and communications is an ongoing goal. It's not,
Right.
it could happen concurrently, but, okay.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Sorry, Cindy, one other thing. Could you please clarify what misinformation incidents means? Tracking the number of misinformation
I
incidents?
think that like misinformation for the library board really comes down to like I guess, I mean, it's multifactorial. So like why don't we have a library? Do people even use libraries? How much is like, and how much it costs is like the big, I think we need to do a better job of getting that information out. We hear rumors every once in a while of like, well, they're gonna hire 15 librarians. It's like, that was never like something that we proposed or anything, so just like, I think using some of the survey data too and like coming up with like, oh, we've repeatedly seen these things, like it's time to like address it.
Okay.
But
Thank you.
At the same point, I think misinformation is very much it might be a misnomer in a way. Maybe it's a misunderstanding of the process, the goals, etc. Because I feel like misinformation is very much a specific type, while in reality, the things you mentioned, yes, one or two of them might be misinformation, but it's also a misunderstanding.
right.
It's more of that catch-all.
Okay. So let's move on. It's already been an hour. Move on to new business. So the first item is discuss and consider the budget amendment, which is linked in your agenda under 6A. This budget amendment is being presented here because it basically takes the funds that we were allocated to the library general fund and does a better job of reflecting the actual budgeting that's been happening over the last 6 months. We're not requesting any other funds. These aren't, so the number isn't increasing or decreasing, but I think it does a better job of showing the hourly wages and the programming operational expenses. So we don't have it, the way it was defined is basically from last year where Tracy was 10 hours and then 16 and then all 20 for like a month. And then now she's been 20, but it never formally was changed, and this formally changes it. So it's been 20 hours a week. And then it better reflects our operating supplies and expenses. And we also are not looking at grants, donations, and foundation, because those are just too variable, I think, for us moving forward to say that we can assume that we are going to have $5,000 of donations every year. Like, that is just not an assumption that we are in the position to make. Where maybe established libraries can make those assumptions in their budgets, we can't. So this memo and the proposed amendments basically states. So it is a discuss and consider.
I move that we approve the budget memo as written.
Second.
There's a motion by Megan, a second by Eric. Is there any other discussion on it? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. The second is the discuss Village of Cottage Grove 2024 survey results. So I had sent, I think this in an email, which is also, it linked in the village agenda, so it's already been presented to the public before, but I thought we could have a discussion about the surveys, because this is the first time that library has been included in it, specifically library programming. And then it also asked a question about if you would support a tax increase and at what level, without giving necessarily, I don't think the question actually gave information about what the library looked like, included, that type of thing. It was just mostly asking about that project. It also asked about other projects that have been floated around before, like a community center, a senior center, a pool. I think we're also listed in there. And
Probably pick up,
recycling.
yeah, recycling.
Yes.
The leaf truck.
So I came up with a list of, so I mean, and then there were comments that people could give open-ended comments. And so I had taken all of those comments and I had sorted by basically pro versus con, like we want a library, we don't want a library. And the big takeaways really come down to just tax impact. And going through all of those comments, I think I just kind of also came up with some other recommendations. I'm trying to open it. For maybe how we can how we can address and like move forward from using this survey, and if there are things we want to change going forward. I don't know when the next community survey will be sent out, or if there will, I don't, obviously not this year, but if there will be one next year. I think for me, looking at the graphs that were presented in the village document, there's a huge opportunity for increasing library programming, which I think we're aware of as a library board, because the NA no basis, I'm assuming those people, maybe they didn't know there was library programming, they've never been to a program, they're not using it. So there's 33% of respondents that we could then potentially target. Something that we've thought about too in terms of just kind of increasing programming, our reach. I think, and the survey doesn't capture this, but the apartment complexes and the individuals that live in those complexes, the survey shows that people didn't respond from that demographic. And so I don't know if those people are using our services or not, so trying to kind of figure out if we can get in there and see how they feel too about this. I think 48% would not support this service at any level of property tax increase. It was a little bit lower than the other projects, but and then there's, obviously 52% said that they would support it at some level, and that's just, I guess, the data and how, I don't know if we want to talk about that or not. This is the first time a question has ever been asked, other than like the 2008 referendum, about financially supporting it for increases in taxes.
I mean, for me, one of the big things that jumped out is the N, how many people actually responded. And throughout the entire survey, so like, yes, that you had 500 response, over 500 responses total. But when you get down to like the library question, you only have 458. And when you think about a village of the size that we have with the population, that is a horrible response rate. And that's putting it lightly from the researcher side of things.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
Yeah, remember, I also have my doctorate and going through all the fun stuff. So yeah, I can joke about that, and I can also joke about
Yeah.
how you had your mixed methodology on the top there too. So
I never got, got
yeah.
to that part.
Anyways, but I think, while very helpful, at the end of the day, you have to take this with a grain of salt because it's not a wide enough population. You think about how it was distributed. I'm thinking back to the village board meeting when they talked about the survey, and they got a couple hundred response bump by including it in the water bill. So again, think about the population that would actually look at that, read it, might not have it on auto pay in there. So it's not a true representative survey, but at the end of the day, it's the best we have at this very moment.
So this, I think, really serves as kind of our baseline. And, moving forward, if the village does do additional surveys, I think they'll probably be changed a little bit too, especially the way questions are asked and the scale that's being used. I did go through and took all of the raw data, and there were about 137 duplicate IP addresses, assuming that that's coming from the same household at least. I think it was open for such a long period of time. We could talk all day about like survey methods and data, which is like so fascinating. But yeah, I agree with everything you said. But this was the first time we've ever had comments too, and so I thought it was, for me, just a useful exercise. I did want to do a lot more with like some coding and all sorts of funnish stuff. I didn't have time. So my recommendations moving forward, if you want, I can pull some of this data and use it in our budget justification. There were several comments about, well, I ranked library programming low because there isn't enough of it, which I thought was also very interesting. Again, that goes to the way you're asking questions and who you're asking it to. I think that we can use some of this data in combination with the data that we are collecting over programming and make some good kind of infographics and kind of get that at least use it when we're presenting our budget justification and who we are and what we do is helpful. Penny Library came up quite a bit, and I thought it was really interesting the way individuals framed that. They're like, well, we have a library right down the street we can use, and that's not true. We pay for Madison's library. Penny Library is not Cottage Grove's library. It was not built to serve Cottage Grove, and I think one of the most interesting things that have come over the last couple of years is that libraries serve the communities that they're in with their very specific needs. They know the people that live there. They're not serving our needs. Like, they don't look at Cottage Grove residents as their true patrons. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I was just gonna, that's a very interesting point. I like that a lot. I just thought it was interesting. So when I first looked at these village survey results, I made the mistake of looking at the comments, which you should never look at the comment section to anything ever. It just reminds you of the problems with humanity. But as I'm looking now more at this question they asked of so many different public services of like, would you support an increase in taxes? And I actually think it's kind of funny because the library is not even close to the least popular thing that they suggest. Like, way more people are saying, no, we would not want our taxes increased at all for an aquatic center or for a senior center or for public transportation or for anything. So to me, that speaks again that the detractors in our community or the people who don't want a library are not, it's a tax issue. It's a money issue. It's not a they hate libraries issue. It's how they want the government to spend their money kind of thing, which I just think sometimes we get lost in that and forget about that, but that really is at the heart of what a lot of the the contention or sort of the,
The
you know,
survey
the
was-
issues look like, which again, taking into account all of the flaws with the survey that everybody has, you know, raised, it is interesting to see when you ask about like, do you want a senior center? Well, almost 60% of people are not willing to pay a dime for a senior center, whereas we've at least got 50% that. You're right, yes, sorry, we have 52% that would at least give $1 towards a library.
And I think like taking this and moving forward, hopefully we are asked in the future about how we would want these questions asked in a community survey, and we can really maybe tailor it to like libraries are community centers, senior centers, blah, 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 blah. Would you support? I mean, we can start to tailor the question a little bit more to like what it would actually represent.
So I'll, despite everything I said on the outset, one thing I will say clearly is that this helps us, actually, let me rephrase. This reaffirms our thought process and our SMART goals, and communication being one of the goals in there. Just thinking about all the things that we say already today in this meeting, not many people will understand that we pay a tax in there. And so how we as the village, the royal we, are paying for that, and it's not just to Peony, it's to the other ones as well, and so, and how that is calculated, and so I think this just reaffirms, and I would say probably strengthens the need for us to really think through our communication plan in the story we want to tell. That for me is the biggest insight out here. Well, and the second one is we also need to build upon this and get more data in different varieties and different populations.
To your point, JP, I've talked to actual librarians at Madison, Monona, and McFarland. They aren't even aware about how the Dane County tax system works and that our tax dollars are going to their libraries. When I explain that to them, their minds are kind of.
And we're explaining it
Minds
at a very
explode.
high level. The formula is really crazy.
I guess, yeah, my point is if actual librarians in Dane County aren't aware of the standards and the tax system, how would we ever expect our residents to be aware that we're paying X number of dollars? I'll let Cindy surprise you all every
Because
year.
we're almost there. Okay. So those are the survey results. I think we have some ideas moving forward whenever the next survey comes out, but it's also given Tracy, I think, a little bit of direction too on like on our, at least on our social media, perhaps also incorporating a little bit of like a fact of the month or something in the newsletter, something like that, just to start getting this information out, continuing to get information out. All right, should we move on to discuss and consider edits to the media policy? If you open up the attachment, I think it is a track change. If not, you have to scroll down to the media policy. I'm not sure what page it's on. I think I inputted it as track changes.
It's page 15.
And so there's just language in there that basically gives us the ability to hide comments, not delete anything, because it is public record, but to hide comments that might be very inappropriate for our social media platform.
And are very rare.
Yes.
Who monitors what's on social media? Is that you, Tracy?
Me primarily. Cindy also has admin access, so she'll help when I'm out of town.
Yeah.
Sorry. Me primarily. Cindy also has admin access, and so does JJ. I don't think JJ spends much of any time on there, but Cindy is able to step in. And to be honest, the only time we've seen any very harsh, negative, and degrading comments was around the Pride event, and they were from people who didn't live here. So those are the kind of comments we're talking about hiding, not deleting.
My wife even saw that and noted that people outside of town are
Right.
complaining.
Right. It was an organized group from outside of Cottage Grove.
So this is a discuss and consider.
I move to accept these changes.
Is there a second? Lisa. All right, a motion by Eric, second by Lisa. Is there any more discussion on it? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. All right, we have discuss and consider the appointment of JP to the vice president role. We do, so Stefan did leave, so with JP's addition, I'm just gonna slotted him in this role. He agreed to do it. We do have, we can revise roles in our November, December meeting, whenever we meet. If he decides it's terrible, or like someone else, if we wanna reorganize at any point in time. So it is a discuss and consider.
I move that we approve the appointment of JP. Say your last name again.
Via Vicencio, but don't worry about it.
Via Vicencio. No, I want to get it right. I can do that. I just wanted to make sure I heard it. To Vice President of the Library Board and all the honors that confers.
Is there a second?
Seconded.
Okay. All right, there is a motion by Megan, second by Eric. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. All right, then we have a discuss and consider JP and Megan to the Library Board Facilities Subcommittee. I have Megan as an alternate here. Obviously, anyone is more than welcome to come. But because sometimes, people can't make it, or it might be kind of helpful to have an alternate on that committee. So we can have a quorum and move on. Sound good?
Does Megan count only as an alternate if JP can't make it?
Nope.
Or if Lucas or Carl
Or
can't make
anyone
it?
on the committee,
Or
yeah.
Eric, okay.
Yep.
Cool.
I move to nominate JP and Megan to the Library Board Facilities Subcommittee.
Is there a second? Second. Motion by Eric, second by Lisa. Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. All right. So we then have a programming
Thanks.
report from Tracy in every agenda item. You'll find, so we have two things to discuss here. Programming and the metrics that we are looking at, but also the fall schedule is really important because we do want to make sure that we don't have gaps. We are hitting our DEI goals, and this is an appropriate amount of work. And then there's also some centennial specific programming, which is actually probably listed in here too. Okay.
Before I do that, Cindy, can I just very quickly cover a few summer highlights thus
Yes.
far? Okay, I'll make that quick. I did swap out the Story Walk book. Again, that's at Community Park. Anybody is welcome to swing by and check that out. It will be up all summer, and I'll swap it out in September again. To highlight a few of our programs, we had the Bookmobile celebration last Wednesday. It was a wonderful party, as always. We guessed about 125 to 150 people were there. Wonderful party. And again, the Bookmobile staff found it very successful for their growth as well. I think our summer STEAM events that we've been doing every Wednesday as part of Playground Camp has also provided a lot of value. And so these programs are, of course, open to the public, but all the Playground Camp kids that are already at Granite Ridge had the opportunity to attend. So we've had a variety of different presenters come in. And I've heard from all of the playground staff that the kids really look forward to it, and it helps kind of break up the week and provide a little bit of educational value to them. We also had our Pride celebration in June. That was Cottage Grove's first annual Pride Parade. Thank you to Jennifer, who was my co-organizer, along with Kelly Ballard at GDS. Miss Sutter was there, Lisa was there, many of you were there. It was absolutely wonderful, and I think it was the simplicity and the generosity and just the spirit of the people who were in attendance made that event so special. And finally, Distillery. This was kind of a program we started doing last year as just an informal meetup where book nerds could get together and talk about what they were reading. And I think it's really grown and established itself as a core group of people who like to attend every single month and look forward to it. Eric is usually there with his wife. We probably have 14 to 16 people who come every single month now and really look forward to it. Many of them are parents of kids who also attend our programs, and I think they look forward to that. So I think that's something we should definitely continue on every month into the future. So those are a few of the summer highlights. Moving into a few things I wanted to highlight about fall before we move kind of into an open discussion about what is included. So as you know, we've been working with CI Pediatric Therapy Centers since we started programming to do monthly movement story time. And we're gonna try something different with them in the fall. We're gonna host movement story time at Dolphin Swim Academy. So all the kids will get to do their singing and dancing and then have 45 minutes of free play in the pool with a parent or guardian. So that is at no cost to the library board. Thank you to Dolphin Swim Academy for that, and no cost to the attendees. And again, I think that's really hitting a critical DEI mission. I mean, private swim lessons are expensive to many families, and this is giving a lot of kids access to that. We're gonna be doing a grandparent story time. Grandparents' Day is officially the first Sunday after Labor Day, so that's kind of, again, targeting a new demographic that is very present in all of our lives, but we haven't really honored in that capacity. We will continue with our No School Days programs. There are many of those slated in here. The Cottage Grove All Community Read is scheduled for October 24th, featuring Carol Dunbar in conversation with Maggie Ginsberg. The Friends are purchasing 100 of Carol's books, and they will be available to pick up at Village Hall in September. You should all be there. That event is absolutely great. We applied for a grant to do a 5th grade all community read the next day on October 25th. So we would, if we get the grant, we will purchase 175 books written by Laura Bird. It's her second book is coming out in September. And Laura would come in and do a little talk about what it means to be an author. And we would also help equip all of the 5th grade teachers about how to actually host book clubs within the classroom. Fingers crossed we get that. We'll find out at the end of August, right, Cindy? If we don't get that grant, we kind of have a plan B with Laura to still bring her in and provide some value to the 5th grade class. We just wouldn't be able to purchase all the books. Should I talk about some centennial programs now, or do we want to have that as a separate discussion?
It's for the fall, so like the centennial celebration for the village is October 12th. And we're hosting a block party, not the library board, the village centennial committee is hosting a block party that day. But we have come up with October as like centennial month. And so we came up with everything 100 themed. So anything that has 100 on there is what we're calling kind of our centennial programming. And then we also have the schools are going to do something in morning meetings every week, show pictures of historical pictures, maybe do some trivia, and then probably an art project, which will then be relocated to Village Hall like November 1st. That's like the overarching centennial plan.
Yeah, so you'll see a few different centennial programs. On October 1st, we're gonna have anybody in the community paint 100 rocks, which we'll put around Cottage Grove and encourage people to share on social media when they find those rocks. The movement story time will have some kind of 100 theme. We have our contracted librarian from McFarland coming in to do 100 themed story time for older kids. She usually targets those younger kids. We have a professional dancer coming in to teach 100 country dance steps. For, again, anybody in the family. I'm going to be searching for 100 pieces of nature and teaching anybody in the family how to do nature journaling. And I think that kind of covers it for our centennial themed programs that we're working on in October. There are 2 programs that I'd love your feedback on. The first is, there's a local author named Greg Renz. who has contacted us several times. He just seems like a very sweet guy that loves to talk about his book, and he loves to do book clubs. But we wanted to host him in a more official capacity. So I would love your feedback about a different location that we haven't used. So, we use Grace, we use Downtrins, we use the schools. But are there any other businesses or institutions in Cottage Grove that might be a nice fit?
Drumlin comes to mind, or, the fire station, because it is a fire-themed book.
Maybe start with the fire station. We do have another event at Drumlin Residences.
Would the schools be amicable?
Yes, but I think it's an adult event.
Okay.
I think we use the schools for family and youth programming.
Didn't we have an
primarily.
art fair last?
Yeah, I guess the community read is at the school. You're right. Yeah.
I don't mean to contradict you.
No, that's okay. But you're right. The community reads at Granite Ridge School. The Friends have their book club at 1855, so I don't think we'd want to step on their toes.
What's that building across from 1855 that sometimes like Girl Scout troops meet in?
Oh,
What is
Flynn
that called?
Hall?
Flynn Hall?
Yeah.
Is that a suitable location to
Yeah,
ever do
they,
stuff? They don't have,
Yeah.
uh,
I guess I was thinking,
A lot
like,
of stuff
what
in it.
business can we
Okay.
support? Where people could also grab something to eat and drink, too. Anyway, you can send me an email. We don't need to spend a lot of time. But that was just one question I had. Like, what venues am I not working with? Because I tend to go back to the same people that I've worked with in the past and who welcome us. Maybe a conversation with Britt at the chamber, too, to help identify new potential partners. My other question or discussion point, in December, as part of Christmas in the Grove, I would really like to do a sensory Santa experience for kids with sensory sensitivities that can't go to the mall and wait in line and be around the loud noises. And I think I'd have to find the Santa and pay the Santa, but also like, what do you think that could look like? Like, would it be? Sorry, you might have some great ideas, but would kids sign up for time slots? How do we identify those kids who could benefit from a sensory Santa experience, knowing that we probably can't promote it through the schools because
Right,
it's a
'cause it's Santa.
religious holiday? Another question you can ponder and get back to me with. I don't want to take up too much time, but I would really like to do that one right.
What if it was some sort of partnership with CI?
Ooh, yeah. And they'll say yes, because they want to do everything. They say yes to everything.
The one thing I would just be kind of curious about is timing of it, because I know that Lake Ridge Bank does bring in a Santa roughly around the same time. So since you have that dedicated partnership with them, might be worthwhile to have a conversation.
Yeah. And I did run this by Britt, and she thinks that Sunday morning would work best with what's happening with Christmas in the Grove already. So we're complementing Christmas in the Grove, not taking away from it. But maybe keeping it at the same location would be beneficial. But should we play music? Should we have stuffed animals available? Like, if anybody has some suggestions about how to better serve that population of kids, shoot me an email. And then one other program I wanted to highlight before we have an open discussion is we have 2 new Little Free Libraries at Bakken Park that have been put up by Madison Reading Project. They have a scout that did that. One is the nice pretty red one by the parking lot, and then there's another one now by the Miracle League that is an accessible Little Free Library. So any kiddo participating in the Miracle League in a wheelchair could have easy access to it. It's low to the ground. It has a handle that anybody can grab. And Jennifer is kind of working with her friends at the Curious Crafter to possibly put a Braille sign. So we're just trying to, again, serve that population of kiddos. But those Little Free Libraries have been emptying out. I have been filling them. Madison Reading Project has been filling them. I'm sure there's other people that are filling them. So there is a need to fill our Little Free Libraries. So I'm working on a Cottage Grove-wide Fill Your Little Free Library Day in September. We'll just promote it to everybody to start collecting their books towards the end of summer, and I'll update the map and we'll really get it out there that our little free libraries are for everybody, but they also, you can't just take the books, you also got to give the books back. So that's another one I'm working on.
I know the little library that's next to my house is constantly getting new books.
That's Peg Zisman's little free library, your neighbor.
Yeah.
And I know that Peg and her wife purchase books to put in that little free
Wow.
library.
I didn't know that.
They're
Fun.
big Disney people, so they.
Yes, I knew that part.
And there are a few other privately run little free libraries that purchase the books themselves, but all of the books in our parks are not being filled by anybody except the people living here. Sorry.
My one thought is, I mean, it's great to have one day, but that's cyclical in terms of the calendar year. There are times like, for example, summer, where we might need to do it more often or have a supply come into play. So that's something to think about for the facilities planning committee to consider. Just saying that loud before I forget it and hope that someone else like Megan can help me remember. But then I think one day is probably not enough. Thinking about this, and I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but maybe more often.
Like it just becomes a regular second Saturday of the month is Cottage Grove, fill your little free library day, whatever that
Maybe-
turns to be.
Maybe not that
Seasonally,
often, but yeah.
seasonally. Without a library, we still have to get the books out to people, so raising awareness is very positive. Does anybody know if we run into any legal or moral considerations if we're telling people to go to private residences to fill little free libraries? Or do we assume if somebody puts up a little free library, they're fine with anybody coming and using it and refilling it?
My assumption was later. That
I did too, but just
Yeah.
wanted to be sure.
So I would say we could share the map and the addresses for those, because those are established for the libraries in the village that are either registered or they're registered with the village or.
Okay. And maybe part of that week, I can share all the public little free libraries at the parks to help bring awareness to communities about where those are.
So in the information that's going into the community guide for the fall, we always have the little free library map. Can we put the
park ones?
can we put the date for the library, fill your library, whatever? Can we make that like a little graphic on
Like
that
on its
page, so
own?
that people know when they flip to that page, like, oh, this date,
Yeah.
like, promote it?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Did you want to have a discussion then about what individuals think about the list,
Yeah.
the timing?
Yeah, so everything on here is pretty well finalized. If it's highlighted, I still have a small little detail to figure out, and so that's just kind of a note to myself. I know at our last meeting, we talked about how summer got a little bit heavy with programming, and I got kind of strapped for time. To me, this feels pretty manageable, but I'd love your feedback if it feels like not enough or too much in any given area. There's a ton of toddler preschool. That number's really ramped up by the fact that McFarland is here every other week, targeting that age group specifically.
How do you feel about the spread between like the baby to adults programs? Are there enough for everyone? I mean, I know that we struggle obviously with teens. Do we get the gaming nights
I'm
sorted
still
out?
trying to speak with my resident gamer expert.
Okay.
to figure
Maybe
that out.
like if that doesn't happen in the fall, maybe that's a January ask to put that together. So it's like gaming night, and you have like the screens, and then you play game. I don't know what it is.
I don't
but
understand
yes,
that.
it's supposed to be amazing. Maybe we just reach out to Monona and ask what the logistics are of that there.
I'm just really impressed with what you've already come up with, Tracy, so thank you so much. I also did want to mention, my kiddos and I were at Monona Library the other day, and our son, Max, who will be 11 in August, was really excited about the possibility of a Dungeons and Dragons group. And I know the middle school has one, but Monona's already started, and I asked if he could kind of, enroll after the fact, but they've already kind of set some logistics and foundational. But I'm just wondering, I thought I'd throw that out there as a possibility to target that kind of tween age group.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if we have any D&D experts.
I might need to attend some of those programs because that's just not in my wheelhouse.
Yeah, me
I was
either.
gonna
And if
say-
I'm a person that's facilitating that, I feel like I need to be somewhat of an expert, or I need to find somebody in the community that can get that conversation going.
Yeah.
I just don't know
I'm
what's
no expert
involved in
either,
those
but-
things.
I was gonna just say the same thing, like, I know of Dungeons and Dragons, but maybe we need to have, like, reconnaissance mission, like,
Yeah.
literally go to one of these teen programs that Monona does or happens at Penny or something, and just as information gathering to get a better idea of, like, when they say they wanna have a Dungeons and Dragons get party, shindig, I don't know what the kids call it. Like, what does that entail? How many, what do we need to do, that kind of thing? And I know we've talked too with teens and tweens, it's very hard to pinpoint a specific topic or hobby or pop culture thing that they are all, they're all very passionate about their specific individual one. So I'm wondering if we can think more broadly about a way to do something just with, like, with hobbies in general for teens, and a way for them to find other kids in the community that have similar hobbies with them, or something along that. I mean, I have no specific idea here, I'm just thinking out loud, but, because again, there's gonna be some that are super into Dungeons and Dragons, or super into gaming and those kind of things, but it's not as easy as it is with toddlers, where everybody likes dinosaurs,
Right.
everybody likes animals, like.
And
I
again-
feel like after losing Stefan and Dave, we don't have any parents of teens anymore on the library board or the facility subcommittee that really understands that demographic.
Is there a possibility to maybe talk to Monona about a library swap of, like, Dungeons and Dragons or something, and then give them something that we do really well?
Do you- Jennifer, do you know if Angelica or Tiffany leads that, or if they bring in somebody from the outside?
I'm not sure, that's a good question, but.
I'm
So I
trying to
think
find
we've had
it.
this conversation before. Is it a dungeon master a thing? Or I
Yeah.
feel like
Yeah,
I wasn't gonna say it.
But
But I'm like, I also like read terrible things. Like, I don't know if I should say that. Is that a thing?
No, it's a thing. So here's the thing I will say. D&D has gone through a resurgence. It was popular with my group, which is the millennials. And then now it's kind of passed on to kind of now the Gen Z, which is, well, no, it's not Gen Z. I forgot whatever the teens group is now. Alpha, thank you. Yep. And so that's one of those things that it can be, I mean, there's a whole storyline. It's a series. You're kind of role-playing out a story, a campaign. That being said, people who do D&D are probably some of the most compassionate people out there, that this is one of those prime examples where we can leverage the experts in our community, put a call out, see if anyone's interested in attending an event, but also facilitating it. So it's one of those things, Tracy, like, if you have these ideas, one of the things that I would encourage you and empower you to do is lean on the experts within our community. You don't have to do it all. I mean, look at what you've done.
Right.
I definitely lean very heavily on experts in the community, but it tends to still be a topic that I'm somewhat aware of.
Sounds like you should put a call out
I
or
like
talk
that
to Monona
idea.
and see if they can put you in contact with experts, because I'm sure if they have someone who's leading it, that person probably knows someone that lives over here that could
Yeah,
potentially
they might know
lead it.
somebody from
So
Cottage Grove who would
I
be
would
thrilled.
go that route.
Okay.
And that's just one example, but I just, when I did ask about it, they, the librarian at Monona Library indicated that they've had so many requests for an additional group that they were thinking of opening another. So I thought, that could be a great way to target our tween teen community, and even perhaps, as JP was saying, maybe a volunteer from, like an 8th grader, or from the high school, for instance, or one of the millennials who is still an expert who could facilitate. So just one idea.
Okay. Or perhaps Cottage Grove could be a satellite location for Monona Library.
And again, in thinking through this, because I think D&D, for instance, using that as an example, meets regularly, it would be much easier if we had a library space.
Yeah. Right.
Looking at the list too, do you just want to touch real quick on, like, does it meet, do you feel like it meets our DEI? Is there a good, like, breadth of and diverse topics? Do you feel like anything is maybe missing? And if it is missing and we can't fit it in because of Tracy's schedule too, like, we can roll that over into our 2025 list.
I just wondered, and you've probably done this, but have you considered using the apartments, like their community room?
We did. We used it quite regularly last year for monthly story time. They've had a lot of staff transitions, and the communication has been really challenging. So I've kind of gotten the direction from the library board that, you know, after so many failed attempts, that we kind of just had to let that one go. Okay. That being said, I was just put in touch with the CEO of Moving Out. We had a phone call last week about what we're doing in Cottage Grove, because she was interested in moving out, being part of the Disability Pride event on Sunday. But that kind of led into a larger conversation about working with them again. So, you know,
Maybe. Okay.
yeah.
And it might be worth revisiting now that they've been there for what, at least a year now. They may have staff that are sticking around more long-term, or at least a better sense of what the residents there
Yeah.
would be interested in. So it might
Mhm.
just be a note for, like, as we're talking about programming for next year, to think about that.
It's tough too because the residents are transient as well.
Right.
People move in and out of there pretty regularly.
Is there a community space across the street?
I have no clue.
Maybe that's another complex that you could just
Is
maybe
this
target?
Authentics or is?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Is there anything else programming related we should discuss before moving on?
I do feel like a lot of our DEI stuff was happening in the spring and the fall, and there's not too many DEI specific programs.
Aside from the Pride Parade and the Disabilities
In the fall.
Month.
In the
and-
fall.
Oh, gotcha,
Mhm.
okay. I was like,
With
You're
the
forgetting
exception of we're constantly talking about ways to improve programming. So now we have a general form anybody with a mobility issue can fill out to attend any of our events and we'll try to accommodate their needs.
And then can we put that in the newsletter too?
Yeah, I'll put that in the newsletter. I also forgot to mention, Sunday is our second annual Disability Pride Month celebration, 2 to 4 at Doundrins. And we have several disabled dancers who will be performing for us. We'll have an art exhibit from Arts for All, so disabled artists from across Wisconsin will have their art displayed at Doundrins, and it can be purchased if you're interested. We have an author and a few other speakers from the community as well. And Representative Jimmy, I don't know Jimmy's last name because he only goes by Jimmy.
I think
Well,
it's Anderson.
Jimmy Anderson, that sounds right. Will be there and he'll be opening up the event.
Okay.
So encourage you all to attend that.
Anything else for programming?
I know that we're running over time, so I want to be respectful of people's time. No. But I think this is really important and dear to my heart. So as a co-organizer of the Pride event, which was a huge success, as Tracy said, we had many families reaching out to us afterwards and asking when the next one was going to be and how could they get involved. And so that was really exciting. So we're looking forward to next year. I did want to clarify regarding the playground camp. As co-organizers, we had worked with Parks to formulate a plan as the playground camp is held at Granite Ridge during the same time as the Pride event. And it was my understanding that an email was sent out to parents letting them know, and the plan from our understanding was to allow the playground camp kiddos an opportunity to attend with parent permission, the outside part, not the inside Pride events. And that also the email sent out indicated that parents could opt out. So the day of the event, the playground camp was not outside at all. We didn't see them actually until we were cleaning up and just about ready to go. And there was some confusion as to what happened. It sounds like an email was sent out indicating that due to weather, the kiddos stayed inside the whole time of the Pride event. I would just like to recommend that next year's Pride event be held during the school year and perhaps not during playground camp time, so that families who wish to attend could have the opportunity to gather. And I also think it's really important to reaffirm that the Village Library Board supports the LGBTQ community and that we are allies. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. I think, and Tracy and I had talked a little bit after the Pride event too, and I don't know if communication lines got crossed, or and if you'd like me to try and figure and get a little bit more information and report back to you, I can definitely try and navigate that. And we had talked too that I think because of the overwhelmingly positive response that this would be, we need to probably target a weekend and make it a bigger, a little bit bigger event too, so that more people can join in. And obviously, we support I think, this board definitely supports the LGBTQI plus community. And so, yeah, thank you. All right, I know it is getting late. We are moving down to communications and miscellaneous business. We have a consider approval of vouchers, 2 documents linked. So one is the operating account details, which is basically our budget and what we're spending. The second is the Storywalk account details. So the Storywalk was our capital purchase from last year, well, this year. And that included kind of all of the installation and everything. This is the summary of it. It actually is not, it's ARPA funding. ARPA funding, yes, that was used for this specific purpose. And so that's what's detailed in that attachment. So we just need to discuss and consider. Or I need a motion, not a discussion.
I move we approve the vouchers.
Second.
Motion by Megan, second by Eric. Any more discussion on it? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. Committee reports? No committee report needed. Library Board President report. We will continue with our office hours. I think it's also a good touch base for Tracy and I to talk about upcoming things, who needs to be paid, kind of a little bit, kind of a logistics there. Community night out is going to be our outreach, so we can maybe send an email out. I think it's Wednesday, October 21st. Community night out. August. What did I say?
October.
The next month. Oh, did I really? Oh, Centennial. August 21st, 5 to 8. There's a movie afterwards. We're going to have a library board table. So if we can have celebrities and others, we'll probably be right next to PTO, right next to the Friends group. So the 3 of us will probably do it all. So mark your calendars for that. We can get a sign up for slots or something.
So I'm
too.
happy to volunteer.
Okay, awesome, thank you. Tracy mentioned the Bookmobile celebration that happened last week. What week is it? Yeah, last week. That was sponsored by a Dane Arts Foundation grant. So I just completed the reports. Was that yesterday? I can't even keep anything straight. I think it was yesterday I submitted it, or Monday. And then we are waiting on that Dollar General grant, which would fund that one program. And then what everyone has been waiting for, the Dane County Library tax information specific to the village. So in the 2022 tax year, the village paid $270,104.41 in Dane County Library tax. And that got then distributed so that's what we paid as a village. It gets distributed to the libraries that the village residents use. And that is specific to the village, does not include the town. The town was 136-ish, I think. So, don't quote me on that, but that was for the 2022 tax year. The 2023 tax year, The village portion bumped up to $321,366.57. So that is basically a $51,000 increase in Dane County Library tax, and we expect that to continue to increase each year. That is all I have for that report. Friends report.
The Friends of the Cottage Grove Library doesn't have a lot going on in the summer. They had their Zoo to You kickoff summer reading program at Taylor Prairie School. I can't think of the North Lawn Park. Right after school had ended, I believe it was that Friday, and they had a great attendance and gave out lots of free books. The Friends are doing some planning for the fall and then the coming year, and plan to continue to support all the library board events that they have in the past and whatever the library board's doing.
Thank you.
I will just add that the Friends are going to be, we're going to be taking over the programming that the Friends have been doing, which is Zoo to You and Earth Day. And so those will become big events that the library board facilitates. Again, they'll be partners. I think I already mentioned that. And then I was wondering, Megan, if you could maybe send an email just discussing the sharing of our events in particular, to kind of help spread the word about our events, and in particular the lunch and learns, which are sponsored by the Friends, to make sure that those are being promoted through that channel as well. And I don't know, I guess one suggestion too, I don't know if you could be an administrator on that Facebook page or their social media account, or have access to their listserv, but that might maybe streamline a little bit of what the information coming here and getting out could happen.
Yeah. It sounds like Robin's in Europe currently,
Yes.
but when she gets back out.
Yeah, you don't
Yes.
have to, yeah.
But yes, I will email her.
Okay.
Cindy, as part of your conversations, did you discuss if the Friends will continue to be the in-kind sponsor of Lunch and Learns, given that we have our own Zoom account now?
I think that it would be a nice gesture to ask if they would still be interested in doing that. So last year, we didn't have access to Zoom, so they provided the Zoom accounts for us, but they don't need to purchase their own Zoom account next year because we're using village channels and stuff. But if they'd like to still, because that is kind of like a tie-in to the Friend, like, you know, both of our logos, and if they help market it.
Just a suggestion, so they were an in-kind sponsor this year because they were giving us a service they had already paid for. But could we potentially have them as the official sponsor, and they donate $100 per program and kind of elevate the level of commitment and buy-in?
Can you take that back to the Friends as well? Thank you.
I just threw out $100, maybe it's 50, I don't know what it
some
is,
kind of
but,
financial contribution to pay for the speaker.
yeah. Because we typically pay $200 per speaker, but not every speaker charges us. For example, if it's, like David Peterson, for example, has done many programs for us at no cost. Dane County Library Service is doing a Libby talk, not charging us, but anybody that's an outside consultant, we pay $200 to. So maybe we even that out over the course of the year, and that equals out to $100 per program, and they're the official sponsor.
And that allows us then to offer potentially more lunch and learns too, or, you know, bump up the number that we have. So moving forward, we're gonna move into closed session. So this closed session is regarding the discussion of employment and compensation of library board staff. The Village of Cottage Grove Library Board will enter into closed session pursuant to Wisconsin State Statute 19.851C, considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibilities. Is there a motion to move into closed session?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Roll count votes. JP, I would say your last name.
You don't want to try? Aye.
Aye. Kel Nelson, aye. Swanson,
Aye.
Braun,
Aye.
Rose. Sutter. Aye. Closed session. How do you say it?
Via,
Vil-
vis-
Vi-
via,
Via
vi,
Va
sen,
Vicencio. Via Vicencio. Okay.